There you have it, guys. Another amazing episode of the Healed and Cash Flowing podcast show. And this was a special one for me because I am literally learning from Peter every single day. I am so proud of the work that he's doing. But more importantly, I love how he lives life. He's doing things that he actually loves. And because he loves what he does, it comes through. People feel magnetic to his work because he himself is enjoying himself. The fact that he gets to influence and teach and grow himself and other people is just a beautiful bonus. And I love what he says. He's always about, he wants to have fun, he wants to help people, and he wants to make money. And that is an amazing sentiment that I aspire to live to. So my friend, my prescription for you today is to listen to this episode at least 3 times, watch it at least twice, and ask yourself this question: do I love what I do? And if you don't, maybe it's time for you to rethink what you're doing and make the decision to live a life on purpose. See you next week. Hi, Peter. Welcome to the Healed and Cash Flowing podcast show. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. We share a couple things. And for those that don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? The Cliff Notes version.
Cliff Notes. I was born in the late 1940s, so you can do the math and figure out my age approximately. I grew up in New York City. I moved to Woodstock, where I currently reside, in 1969, with the exception of 3 years when I went and lived in Holland. From 78 to 81, I've lived here in Woodstock, raised my family. I have 2 grown children. I have 2 grandchildren. I've been a musician all of my life, and for the last, since 1985, so we're talking 40 years, I've been involved in the practice of medical and clinical hypnosis, and I'm very attracted to all spiritual practices from around the world, and involved in studying and seeing which ones I can kind of graft on seamlessly to my existing self.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that's a well-rounded intro, and leaving quite a few things out, but that's my job to bring them out, which is good. So, for those that are not familiar with hypnosis, and I know that it has many definitions, what's your definition of hypnosis?
Yeah, it depends what day you ask me, because it has, it's very mysterious, right? It's not a thing. This has been pointed out by many. It's not a thing, like Bertrand Russell said about electricity. It's not a thing, it's a way in which things behave. So hypnosis, the great hypnotherapist and psychiatrist, Dr. Milton Erickson, who's been a huge influence on me, at one point, he gave several definitions. One was, it is a temporary, pleasant interruption of habitual patterns in order for creative solutions to take place. So that's a nice way of thinking of it as a therapeutic or healing thing, right?
Yeah.
How do we resolve things creatively if we're stuck in thinking about them over and over again the same way? So we have to create a break in the circuit, right? So hypnosis is a conscious invocation of the unconscious.
Which
right?
Which most of the time is running the show unbeknownst to us.
Absolutely, right. So years ago, before I was involved in hypnosis, I heard someone say, 95% of what we do is unconscious. And I was like, how could that be? Yeah. But it seems that all the my going into my brain and finding words to make these sentences is an unconscious process. My knowing how to shape my mouth and lips to speak them is an unconscious process. As I move my hands while I'm speaking, I don't have to think about moving my fingers. This is all unconscious, so much. And it makes sense. It's economical. It's efficient. We're designed this way so that we can focus on something while everything else is going automatically, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we know the brain is lazy another way of saying that it likes to be efficient. So it likes to create patterns of ways of
Yeah.
doing things.
Yeah.
So we don't burn so much energy.
Right. And neurologically, it's easier once a neural connection has been established to go down that route over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's how habits are developed, and they're very efficient. If they're good habits, great.
Yeah.
If they're habits that, and again, when I introduce people to an Ericksonian approach, I say there are certain presuppositions that we start with based on Erickson's understanding of human behavior and communication. And one of them is that every behavior originally had or still has some positive purpose or function. So when we think of behaviors as like asthma is a behavior.
Wow.
Nail biting is a behavior.
Yeah.
And so originally, a phobia had a positive purpose or function. It may no longer, but it's on automatic. It's just going. And so to realize that this is a pattern, that's the first thing, is the aha moment. And then secondly, I don't like this pattern. And thirdly, what are my options for changing it? And that's when a lot of people think, oh, hypnosis.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know what it is, but they know that a bunch of their friends have lost weight or stopped smoking. Those are the two big ones. In our field, I work with so many things, but I would say 50% of my practice is either weight loss or smoking cessation. And a close third is some form of stress management, right? So that's the connection that the general public has with hypnosis. Often I have to spend, and you know this because you're involved in the field, I have to spend some time early in the session re-educating false beliefs and conceptions that people may have from watching old movies on TV or seeing stage hypnosis shows where people act silly. And I say, look, most human beings act silly enough without me hypnotizing them. Yeah. I don't need to do that, One of the big fears people have, even if they're here and they're paying me and they believe in it, is that they're concerned about losing control. And understandable that's an issue for a lot of people. I need to be in control, otherwise I might do or say something embarrassing or make a mistake or whatever.
Or not be safe.
Not be safe, right.
That's a big one for people.
Exactly. So one of the very first things I do, I would say the background, the canvas that everything gets painted on, is to establish an atmosphere of safety. Yeah. That you are safe here. This is a safe container for you to examine and make changes and have insights. And if anything disturbing comes up, we'll deal with it. I can't guarantee that you won't have, that's part of the process often. Yeah. Is revealing things that, oh, wow, that was there.
It's still, sometimes some things that happened 20, 30 years ago.
It was there, it's still there. I buried it. Yeah. And in order, we might say some of these are festering wounds. Yeah. And in order to clean the wound, you have to acknowledge it and clean it out, and then it can heal. Otherwise, it's just going to be in there, in where you can't see it. If it's on your skin, you can see it. If it's inside, you don't know, and you're walking around hurting yourself and others because you don't know why you have these unconscious patterns based on old trauma or fears or whatever, learnings. We could call them learnings. It was a learning that happened that was to protect, and most behaviors, or a lot of them that people develop, are to keep themselves safe, right? Yeah. Or for peer acceptance. I ask all my clients, they come in, let's say, to stop smoking. I say, what do you get from the behavior? Oh, what do you mean, what do I get? I get lung cancer. I'm like, yeah, no. But what did you think back? when you first decided it was cool to light up a cigarette? What was going on? Well, you know, my older brother smoked, or my friends, or, you know, some movie star I idolized smoked, or whatever, and they want to be accepted. They want to be, yeah. So that's a motivation to start something. And then I don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but I often refer back to the Walt Disney film Fantasia, very famous film, different sequences of animation that were done to famous classical music. And one of them is Alexander Dumas's The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Mm.
And I even have over there, out of sight of the camera, Mickey Mouse sitting with dressed as the Sorcerer's Apprentice, a little puppet that some friends of mine sent me from Los Angeles. And the point of it is that it's based on a famous story that the sorcerer gives his apprentice, Mickey, a job. The job is to get pails of water from the well and fill the bath. So Mickey's doing this, and he's lazy. So he looks in the sorcerer's book. The sorcerer goes to take a nap, and Mickey looks and he finds a spell to animate a broom. And he does this abracadabra, and we can think hypnosis is a spell casting, right? Spell breaking. And the broom grows little arms and legs, picks up a pail, and starts filling the master's large bath with water. And very famous music is playing, and Mickey's so happy, and it's going on, and he's conducting, and the broom is filling, and he falls asleep. He wakes up, and the bath is overflowing, because the habits will continue on their own after we create them, even if we're not paying attention to them. So it's a beautiful metaphor, and he freaks out, and he takes a broom. He takes an axe, and he chops the broom. And for a while, the music quiets down, and you think everything's okay, and then it starts up again. Each splinter turns into a little broom. Now there's a whole parade of them carrying water and filling the bath. He's looking madly through the book. He can't find the counter spell. Fortunately, at that moment, the sorcerer wakes up, comes down, looks around, stops. Everything stops. The flood subsides. He shakes his finger at Mickey. Mickey looks embarrassed. So this is how it's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
We create something. Originally, it had a really good reason. Then it's on its own, and we can't figure out how to stop it. So we could think of the sorcerer, well, that's our role as the hypnotist, as the person, the hired gun.
Yeah.
Right? We're brought in to help this person do something. In reality, I can't really make anyone stop or start anything. They have to do that themselves. So there's a sort of a theater that's involved, a ritual of going to see a healer.
Yes.
And presenting your case and paying them. And then they do abracadabra. And you go and you invoke the inner physician, the inner healer. You realign your chromosomes and your neural circuitry, and you make a choice, and you decide to do things differently. And then because we're involved in this little pantomime, then they pay us, and they walk away, and they say, that person, man, you know, that cat, she's amazing, or Peter Blum, he's extraordinary. And I know that all I did was create and hold the space for them and believe in them and say, you can do this. I show you how to get yourself into that state where you can accomplish this, but it's your doing.
Yeah, it's a partnership. And I love how you broke it down so it's not so mystic anymore, pie in the sky. It's really you deciding, I want to change a pattern. I want to change a behavior, going to the person that you connect with, and then participating in the process. That's my favorite part. They are part of the solution.
They do have to.
Yeah.
As much as they would like, in many cases, to abdicate responsibility. And, I made this joke, and I repeated it, that some of my clients come and they sit in this chair, they come and they say, okay, just do me. And I know that has multiple connotations, but they really want me to just, wave my magic wand.
Yeah.
And I say, well, listen, because every good hypnotherapist and wizard should have one, I have a magic wand right here on my altar.
Yeah.
And for $8.99, you can go down to the toy store in town and get one too. But these are the props, right? These are the props of the magician. And my good friend, Dr. Louis Malmadrona, who I work with frequently, he's a psychiatrist who is of a native heritage, part Cherokee, part Lakota. And, we've done teaching together for many years. And one time he was demonstrating something he does called Cherokee body work. And he had someone on a table. And he was doing various manipulations, very similar to osteopathic work. And at one point he brought out these two little white stones. And he had this story. He said, a friend of mine was working doing excavation, building roads through Kentucky, and they went into this mountain and they found these caves with these stones there, and they seemed to have, certain properties. And he placed one by either side of the head of the person he was working on. And proceeded, he said, I'm going to do Cherokee brain surgery now. And we all went, what? And after he finished, and I go, I have access to him backstage. And I said, Louis, what was up with those white stones? He said, well, a shaman's got to have good props. And that is the case. And I've watched a lot of these medicine people, and they're very authentic. And they're very powerful at what they do. And, I don't know if we're going there yet, but I'm going to sort of step in that direction, that I have been very fortunate to be around and sought out native healers and medicine people, men and women who are coming from traditional societies and do this work. And I go to hypnosis conferences for decades, and I give a presentation that's called Shamans, the World's First Hypnotists, because they're working in trance. They didn't call it hypnosis. They didn't have that word, but they were going into that state, and they were using, listen, I have behind me a bowl of sage and a feather. And this is something called smudging, where you purify. You burn sage and you use the feather or a wing to, blow smoke around to purify the person's energy field. I do believe it's real. I can't see it most of the time. Years, when I was a young man and took psychedelics, I could see it, but most of the time I just feel it. I can feel somebody's energy field. I've had aura photos of myself, so you see it. It's there. We don't stop at the skin. We go beyond the skin. But this has been done in many cultures. Some in South America, they use copal or palo santo. Here in North America, often sage or cedar, and you burn and you waft the smoke, and it's like taking a bath. It cleans some of the impurities that are washing you in your energy field. So yes, I believe it works. A. B. It's a ritual. And if you're engaging in something and you get, like you talked about it, you're co-producing this with the client. They have to be engaged. You've got to get them involved. Yes, I buy into this, right? And the more you can do this, I wrote this book, recently called What is Your BS? Which is here, and it says Exploring Belief Systems through Hypnosis and NLP. And there's a chapter in there on hypnosis as ritual. So the idea that we are creating a ritual. Someone comes in and they are introduced and there's a step-by-step process, answering questions, gathering information, and then eventually, I establish this is the place, and we're sitting at my kitchen table, and I say, would you like to go sit in the trance chair? Okay. So there's an agreement. And that's already started with
the process. Yeah.
One of the points that some of my hypnotist friends make is, how good are your clients at following directions?
Right.
That a lot of them ask for them, but they don't follow them. So if I say, how would you like to go sit in that trance chair and close your eyes and begin to go into a hypnotic state, that's giving a suggestion, that's giving directions. They may say, I don't know what to do. I'd like to, but I don't. Okay, I'll tell you what to do. Right? And then you begin a step-by-step process of instruction.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and I love that you talk about a bath. I know that you started very early on as a musician. When did you make the connection of the power of sound in hypnosis?
Boy, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I made the connection of the power of sound to enter into other states of consciousness as a child. I grew up in a musical household. There was music playing all the time. We had a piano. There was music, classical music on the radio. My dad was an opera singer. My mom and dad used to sing together. Music was part of my heritage. Early on, I was playing the guitar when I was 12. When I was 13, and I got bar mitzvahed, which is a ritual for young Jewish men. And I asked my parents, for my big present, I want a kunga drum. They were like, okay. So, I was attracted early on to the power of rhythm and music. And I would sit in my room for hours and with my little kunga drum and just lose myself in the rhythm. Pete, you doing your homework? No. Yes, but not the way you think of it.
Yeah.
So this draw towards music as not just entertainment, but as a door, a portal, an entryway into an altered state of consciousness. It was early on. I still lose myself. I pick up an instrument and I lose myself in it. And, I have so many, many instruments. And I moved through, the 60s, which was a time of great exploration of consciousness. And I used a lot of the tools that were around at the time, the psychoactive substances that were popular. It's been many, many years. I don't anymore, but I did then. And I would hear sound in ways that I never heard it before. I know there's musical sound will pick up well on this. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to go off camera for 1 second and go and get this instrument.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah, this is a version of an instrument called a hand pan.
Yeah.
And they are relatively recent. I mean, I don't know. I know there were Trinidad steel drums, but they didn't sound like this. And so this is and I play this. You don't need to do much. It's so resonant. So the resonant quality was attracting me. I didn't identify it as such, but a really beautiful Steinway grand piano. You hit a note and you hold down that pedal and it goes, or a chord. So every instrument, including the human body, sings. And so this exploration of the effect of sound, and in my early 20s I was introduced to the work of Hazrat Inayat Khan, the Sufi mystic. And Hazrat Inayat Khan, the Sufis are the mystical branch of Islam, the whirling dervishes, the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz. And Hazrat Inayat Khan brought the Sufi message to the West, and he wrote these books, the Sufi Message, volumes 1 through 12. And someone handed me volume 2 or 4, I think it was, on the mysticism of sound and music. And I was reading it, and it was like, oh my God, someone has written about what I have experienced. So that was the beginning of my quest into finding out the history and practice of sound and music as a yoga. And it's called in India Nada Yoga, Nada, which is the nadis of the sound currents. And this is a practice where you work with sound to awaken consciousness.
Beautiful.
Right? Yeah, the yogis knew this. And they work with sound, and they chant mantras. Bij mantras, which are the mantras that are theoretically, I don't know, I don't see chakras, so I accept on faith that they're there.
Yeah. And
they have petals, and each petal, the yogis said, had a particular sound that was connected with it, the Bij mantras, so they're chanting these, and I kept exploring this. So I'm exploring this, and I'm doing these performances of meditative music. We didn't have the word sound bath.
Yeah.
Right? I'm talking about 1976, 1977. I was working as a guitarist, and I was playing the tambura, which is a drone instrument from India, a string drone instrument, and working with other musicians. And it was sort of world music. And then I went and studied from 78. In 78, I moved to Holland, and I went and I pursued an interest I had for a long time of studying North Indian classical music. And I found a teacher, and I studied the raga systems, and I studied sitar for 3 years. And that was very big piece to sort of help understand things. And I came back to the States in 81 and was working as a journalist, because that's what I was doing before I left. And I was still doing that. And I was interviewing people, following my own interests, a small weekly paper, and I had risen to the point where I could give myself assignments, right? So I was interested in alternative forms of healing. And I was interviewing, writing a series on chiropractic, acupuncture, rolfing, shiatsu, right? These were not mainstream yet. 82, 83, 84. My friend Richard Zauer, returning from California, he said, I think you should include me in your series. I'm doing Ericksonian hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming. Never heard of either of them. I said, okay. I didn't know what shiatsu was either. You know? So I go and I interview him. And part of my process was, and one of the perks of doing this series was that I got to experience all of the modalities. So he sat me in he talked to me, he threw a bunch of information, mentioned names, John Grinder. He had studied with John Grinder out in California, one of the founders of neurolinguistic programming. He was talking about Milton Erickson and NLP, and he said here, and he sat me in the chair like this, and this chair, goes back like that, and then he put headphones and goggles on me, and they were feeding in pulse, light, and sound in the alpha and theta brainwave rhythms. And then he this was a chair that had a cassette player, and he put a cassette in with speakers that came around on either side, and there were two voices talking to me at the same time, telling two different stories. I went, bye-bye. Oh, and there were rollers in the chair that went up and down my spine. Like along the acupuncture meridians, and the footrest vibrate, and I was just gone. I was. We understand this in terms of now knowing what I'm doing. This is a technique we call overload.
Yeah.
There's so much data coming in through the senses that the conscious mind just sort of says,
I'm out.
I'm out, right. And Richard came back in a half hour later, and he took the glasses off, and the tape was over, and he said, how are you doing? I said, that was great, man. I recognize this state. That's hypnosis? He said, yes. I said, it's very close to other things I've experienced. He said, yes. I said, and you didn't do anything? He said, yes. So that was his way of showing me that really all hypnosis is self-hypnosis.
Yeah.
He just set me up. He didn't do anything. I was given the tools, and I went into that state.
Right. And the music got you deeper into that state, and all the other stimulations.
Well, not quite, but all the two voices at once, and the light and sound beeping, but also I wasn't done. I said, I need to research this more. I'm going to come back next week and talk to you again. And I said, so that was wonderful, but what would I use it for? I mean, I could meditate and I could go into that state, or, smoke a joint, and, but what would I use it for? He said, anything you like. I said, well, I don't really have any major issues I'm working on now, because I was in denial at the time, but he said, well, it doesn't have to be something that's wrong. It could be something you already do that you'd like to be better at. So I'm an avid tennis player. I said, can I use it for my tennis game? Absolutely. So we did a session, very different. I wasn't sitting in the chair. I was running around. I was standing. He was anchoring excellence, and went out, and I came back a week later. I said, all right, I'm a believer. This stuff works. So that was my introduction. But at the same time, continuing to be fascinated with sound and music. And in the so this is 84, 85, 86, I make the transition over. I'm also introduced to, I had heard recordings of singing bowls, but I had seen them. They weren't around that much. And then they started to appear in import stores, Tibetan stores, Eastern boutiques. I think many of the people watching this at this point know what a singing bowl is. I didn't, I'd heard them, so I knew about them, but they weren't around. So this is a singing bowl. This is a second singing bowl. And a third one. There's a lot of sounds going on here.
Yeah.
Right? These come from a culture that is not using the tempered scale. Right? If you grow up in the West, whether you're listening to Bach or the Beatles or Bob Dylan, doesn't matter. They're still using do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and the that's the major scale, and then there's intervals of sharps and flats. These come from a culture where you get infinite gradations of sound. They're not tuned specifically. People say, well, what note is that bowl? I'm like, this bowl makes This is the one you couldn't see. It's a larger one. This is a beautiful bowl. This bowl makes several different notes. And if you listen carefully, you hear the pulsations of sound. And there's slower beats and faster ones. And so our state of consciousness in some ways could be said to be what's going on with our brainwaves. Right? That is a reflection, a way of gauging what state of consciousness you're in. And now we have the technology to go and hook somebody up and say, oh, your brain right now is predominantly generating alpha or beta. So I believe that these bowls generate pulsations and frequencies that are in the alpha and theta range. So I'm starting to think about, well, that machine that Richard hooked me up to was generating sound and light in the alpha and theta brainwave range for purposes of entrainment. Entrainment is an important principle that I work with and teach, because I teach a lot increasingly. I've always taught, but more so recently, and looking at the combination, like I talked to you about, you mentioned that one of the first things that I said when we met was, I find my mission these days is to bring the message of the importance of incorporating sound into your practice to hypnotists. I've been doing that for a while. Now, with more and more people involved with sound healing, which is a term that wasn't around 30 years ago, I'm a sound healer. I took a weekend course. To bring to them the message of the importance of possibly incorporate an understanding hypnosis. Since when you play these instruments, there are people are going into a hypnotic state. You might as well understand that so that you can utilize it better, right?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful, and thank you so much for demonstrating the sounds and explaining so beautifully how they enhance each other. That's what you said. You said every sound healer that I meet, I tell them you need to learn hypnosis, and every hypnotist you need to learn about sound healing.
I generally stay away from need. It would benefit you. It would be beneficial to do that, right? Yeah. And this is another thing we understand is the precision of language. Yes. That we often use words unthinkingly, phrases, and I work with somatic language also, right? And a client comes in and they're saying frequently, that my boss at work is such a pain in the neck, and later they say, yeah, my 5-year-old is just such a pain in the neck, and I'm like, how's your neck? Do you have neck aches frequently? Yes. It's funny you should ask. Well, maybe you want to stop saying such and such as a pain in the neck. There's a book on my shelf. There's some books I tell people you don't need to read the book if you understand the title. Your body believes every word you say. So when we speak, think about the effect. As a sound healer and as a hypnotist, we're working with the power of sound, and words, spoken words, are audible sound. They're just coded in a language, right? But the sound, the words have meaning, and the brain and the body hear it, and they so there are many examples that I could use of words that people are like unconsciously cursing themselves or others, right?
Yep, that is power in the tongue, as we know. For sure.
Oh, yeah. I knew a woman who was brilliant. In fact, I was married to her. She's gone. She's not on the planet anymore. But she was a very bright woman, had her master's degree in special ed. Every time she would go to add up a column of numbers, she'd have a brain freeze. I said, what? She said, My dad always told me, you'll never be good at math.
Oh, wow.
That's a bad spell.
Yeah.
That's a hypnotic suggestion.
Yeah.
Right? So I said, well, you know, there's many ways. I didn't want to work with her because we were married, but
Correct.
if she'd been a client, I would say, you know, you can go into a dreamlike state and summon the spirit of your dad and tell him, you know, you meant well, but I reject that.
Yeah.
I'm not going with that anymore, right?
Yeah, and it will work.
Yeah. Well, you're reconfiguring a belief system that's been influencing you for so long without even being aware of it, or maybe being aware of it, but not knowing that you can change it, right? You can change it. Timothy Leary, the great leader of the psychedelic revolution, had a recording we used to put on an LP, and it said, this time around you can be anyone you want. That so long, for so many generations, our ancestors more or less inherited the occupation, the customs, the beliefs of their parents, who got it from their parents before, and so on back to antiquity. He said, this time around, this is a game changer. You can be aware of that and choose to follow some of those things. You can also make different choices.
That's beautiful. And I love that in practicing and learning all these modalities, you have firsthand knowledge and experience of how powerful they are. So when you're teaching your students, or something that you do very frequently, have programs going all the time,
Yes.
You're not talking about something that you read.
No.
You live it and you practice it.
Everything. Like we go and I give for many years sound baths, sound meditations. I bring these gongs that are up here behind me, the bowls that I demonstrated. Here's another very beautiful instrument that I got recently. It's a double damaru bowl. So we move sound through the air. It's not stationary. And so we set up and people come and they lay down on the floor and the yoga mats. And sometimes I'm doing solo. Sometimes I'm working with 2 or 3 or 4 other musicians. And we say this is a sonic meditation, a sound bath. And everything that we are doing here for you today came out of our own yoga practices. Everything was, I thank the audience. I say, thank you for being here, because if you weren't here, we'd be doing it in our living rooms. That's what I do. I have these instruments sitting around, and I play them. And I've always played them. And I didn't understand for a long time that this was a way of getting into a hypnotic state. Now I do. And you can too. And you can do it for yourself. You know, growing up with the music presented the way it was, I went to take piano lessons as a kid. I didn't do that well. It didn't move me. Here, I'm saying anyone, this is an instrument here that anyone can play easily. It's a Native American style, plains style flute. It's like a recorder. You just... It's a very simple instrument. Anyone can learn to play it. And I suggest to people, find something you like. A drum, a flute, a bowl, the voice. I also work a lot with the voice, and I encourage people to practice using the first instrument we all got, which is voice, right? So I'm enthusiastic about this.
Yeah.
Even now. And my friend says, how do you do so many things? How do you get the energy? Because they energize me.
Yeah.
Right? I love sharing this information with people. I look for opportunities to do it. So
It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I'm so excited that you're sharing this with practitioners like me that, so I'm trained somatically,
Mm-hmm.
find it very powerfully. And by myself, as I told you when I met, I invented something. And then I found out about you. I didn't invent anything. I
Right.
was adding sound to somatics
Yeah.
and then to hypnosis.
Yes.
And you've been doing that for a long time.
A long
Others have
time.
been doing it for a long time. So I know that you have something coming up for practitioners
I do. I
to
have,
learn.
well, two things in the near future.
Yeah.
One right here in Woodstock, which is working with my friend Dr. Louis Mel Madrona, the Cherokee Lakota psychiatrist, his wife Barb Mangay. They come here a couple times a year from Maine. We're doing 3 days, March 7th to 9th, a place called The Nest on March Madness. And Louis and I both relate to the trickster figure of Coyote.
Mm.
So this is 3 days of playing with each other, doing healing camp, telling hypnotic stories, and other things.
Yeah.
So that's coming up, March Madness. All these things are on my website,
Yes.
transonics.com. I showed one book that I wrote, and here's a book that I put out in 2018, Transonics, the vital link between sound healing and hypnosis, where a lot of the things I talked about today are written about in this book, but this, I changed it in my website a little while ago, so it reflects what I'm doing. So transonics.com has that. The other one that I'm very excited about is a week in Mexico that we're calling Transonics in the Jungle. And it's March 21st to 28th, staying at a retreat center down there, teaching people about the connection between just these things that I've been talking about, but actually leading them through practices. We will be working with sacred singing metals, with shamanic journeying using the drum, with chanting of the vowel sounds and overtone singing, combined with all of the special features that are available there at this amazing retreat center that I've been to several times already in the jungle. We'll have visits to the cenotes, which are these magical underground pools, and to the Mayan ruins, and Temescal, which is a Mexican version of Sweat Lodge, and other goodies, catered vegetarian meals. It's extraordinary. So all that information is also on my website.
Talk about a pattern interrupter, because it's going to be, as I understand, in the jungle. So you get to disconnect from everything and be connected.
That's right.
Inwards and with nature, it's
Very
sound.
much so. And many traditions have recognized the importance of changing your environment for a transcendental experience.
Beautiful.
Right? That you get out of your usual environment and you go on a vision quest, or you go off to the mountains for a retreat, or
Sabbath, taking time. It's a Sabbath.
Yes. In the Australian Aborigine Society, they had something called walkabout. When a young person reached a certain age, they left.
Yeah.
And they just took off, and they followed the song lines. And they didn't get lost. They took off into the wilderness and they found themselves, and then they found their way back. But often it's hard to find ourselves because we're stuck in doing the same SOS.
Yes. Yes.
Same thing, different day. So breaking the pattern, going off there, all your usual amenities. I mean, yes, people will have cell phones and computers. But other than that, you're really off in the jungle, literally, with peacocks and chickens wandering around underfoot.
Yeah. Going back to nature.
Back to nature, and all of the things that we, are scared of. Fire ants, scorpions, spiders. Yeah. It's not for the faint of heart, or maybe it is.
Maybe it is.
Challenge yourself, stretch yourself, right? Growth, I found, for me, it's nice to stay in my comfort zone for a while, and then I'm stagnant. So I have to stretch myself and do something different, right? And this is an opportunity to learn in an extraordinary environment, beautiful environment, and be transformed. So yeah.
I'm excited. Time has gone by so quickly. We have talked about so many amazing things. I just want to thank you for doing the work that you're doing, for not only doing the work for others, but for yourself, and for how generous you are with your knowledge and your experiences and your stories, because you are a storyteller. And I was wondering if you would take us out by playing the gong as we close today. Yeah.
Sure.
That would be amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right. That was not the gong. I'm going to stand over here so that I can look at people. There are two gongs here. There's a Pisces Saturn gong and what's called an Atlantis gong. I don't think it actually came from Atlantis, but
beautiful. Thank you so much.